Whether we're talking about the manipulation of this whole topic or we're talking about the foreknowledge of it before we got there, all of this leads back to the same people. And all of it leads back to lies, deceptions. You can call them, like, especially in this case, this is being played off as just, a little lie of circumstance. It's a convenient lie. Like the idea that BlackRock created a plan to bail out the U.S. economy that we were sold as because of coronavirus that you later find out they created before this whole thing started. Oh, but aren't we told that this whole problem with the economy was only because of coronavirus? So then why did they make a plan to bail out the economy before we got here? Well, we also should know that the economy's already been in a bad way, and we've all known this was coming. Anyone that's been paying attention all the way before this, what happened was COVID-19 just gave them the excuse to sell you the plan and then say, well, it was COVID, it's not our fault, as opposed to here's 2008 all over again times 10. And it's going to come from your pockets again. Well, that's what this is. Now I'm going to play this video. I want you guys, I'm going to play it and stop and talk little parts because I want to play the good portion of it. And I want to get with the copyright strike. So we're going to play this, and I really want you guys to absorb this information because this is absolutely paramount. And this, again, if you've been watching the shows that we've been doing, then you would have already seen this stuff because most of this we've already covered.
The country is distracted by coronavirus and numerous ongoing protests. Another too big to fail asset manager, which handles over $7 trillion in direct management and another $20 trillion through their proprietary software. BlackRock is coming under scrutiny by one investigative author, and she's calling for them to be broken up under antitrust laws. Ellen Brown is an...
Now, what's interesting right off the bat is remember James Corbett's discussion in regard to Standard Oil, Rockefellers, the idea that the breaking up of Standard Oil was the plan, right? That was the point, that they tricked everyone into thinking that this was something that they didn't want. Problem, reaction, solution. So then they pleaded with the government, you can't allow this. And then they did exactly what they planned from the beginning, right? So they tricked them into asking for the thing that they wanted. And the solution was ready the whole time, which was the breakup of Standard Oil, which immediately made Rockefeller the richest person in the world instantaneously. And we see what happened from there.
Attorney and author of numerous books focused on the financial sector, and she's the founder of the Public Banking Institute. Ellen, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
So you have recently written a scathing deep dive into this asset management company called BlackRock, which most people have probably never heard of. Given their size, how have they gone almost completely undetected by the public, unlike companies like Goldman Sachs and the like? And what sparked your recent write-up on them?
Well, they were just appointed in March to administer as much as $1 trillion of the Federal Reserve's bailout money, money that's allocated to purchase corporate debt. So this is basically toxic corporate debt, like happened in 2008 when the Federal Reserve bailed out Bear Stearns and AIG by buying toxic debt off their books. And BlackRock was set up then to manage those sales. And so
which we've talked about last time we talked about this, right? That BlackRock was involved in 2008. Again, in the same exact way. They were brought in to manage. I mean, basically, to make this very simple, they were the facilitator between the transfer of wealth between you and the people it went to. That's what this basically boils down to. Now, that's not exactly what they say their job is or what their job actually is, but this is what it boils down to. Right now, it's the same thing. We're talking about when she says toxic assets. This is the situation that's created by the people gambling with your money, whether we're talking specifically the banks in this case, but we're talking about groups like BlackRock and the asset managers and these groups that are manipulating the situation, right? So 2008 happened, we know, largely because of the loans, right? It was, I'm forgetting the exact term. Anyway, it was in regard to, basically anybody could go in with basically nothing and get a loan for a massive house, right? And this was done then they would package those things as if they were not that bad in a big group and then sell them off to other groups, right? And just, I know this gets complicated for people, but the ultimate point is that it creates a situation that's guaranteed to fail. And that's where we are again. Or actually, that's where we were before this started. And they brought in BlackRock again for the same exact situation. And they planned it this time. They probably planned it last time. My point is they had this plan before COVID started. Now, just keep listening, because she makes incredible points here.
That's one reason they got the job, but this was like a no-bid contract to deal with a lot more money, in this case, up to $1 trillion. And the BlackRock's...
Meaning this is more, way more than 2008. And as she said, no bid, which I already pointed out before, right? That we're no longer in control of the asset, of the treasury, essentially, in this country. That's what this boils down to.
Main business is exchange traded funds, or that's their main profit maker right now. And they are the biggest exchange traded fund manager in the world. They and two others are the three big ones, and they have a controlling interest in every single big corporation in the country.
Every single big corporation in the country. Think about what she just said. By the way, thank you, subprime. I couldn't remember that. Subprime mortgages is what we were talking about. And by the way, we also had that boiling up again in regard to subprime auto loans. It's like, they literally did not do anything different. We gave our money so they could bail out these massive banking institutions, and all they did was pay themselves bonuses. We all know the story. But the worst part is they didn't even stop what they were doing. And you can look right now, ever since 2008, they not only didn't stop, they've been doing what they did to create 2008 times 10. And that's why we're here again. Except this time they fooled you into thinking it's your fault. Or at very least, China's fault or a virus's fault, right? The reality is, well, you guys just won't let yourselves get better, so you're going to keep being locked down. You're not doing what you're told. You're not taking the vaccine. You're not wearing your mask. And now this is where we are. It's all a big illusion, at least in this one regard, to take more wealth from you and transfer it to them, right? This is a huge part of this. You know what? Maybe even the whole point. But we always have to remember that there's multifaceted agendas. You know, we're talking about the technocratic idea. We've got the vaccine issue. We've got just profit in general. But at the end of the day, literally having a group like this, BlackRock, which is an obviously Israeli-tied company, that's just like all the rest of them tied to the Israeli government. We're talking about all these different companies recently that are, surveilling the United States, creating voting machines and voting software, all of them tied back to Israeli government intelligence. Well, now we've got a company that essentially is using the financial institution to take control of this country's finances. You're telling me you wouldn't create a fake pandemic to create the largest transfer of wealth in history and essentially take control of another country's driving force? Yeah, that pretty much sums it up to make it perfect. Look, if that was all it was, that would make sense to me. But that's just my take on it. But at the end of the day, this is what's happening. The nuance of it, you can argue about why BlackRock did it or whether it's a good thing, but that is what's happening.
And exchange traded funds they manage or they are invested in by pension funds and other funds, and the funds generally control the stock market. So in effect, BlackRock controls the stock market. And the first thing they did with this power was...
Again, and I haven't flipped past that point a second ago. They have controlling interest in almost every large company in this country, as she says. And they have control over the stock market, in effect. How is this not the most alarming thing you've heard? This is absolutely crazy, and no one's talking about it. I talked about this a month ago. And I followed up again. We've been trying to get people to talk about this for a long time. It's good that some people are paying attention, but this seems to me to be the most obvious example of a profit motive. Who benefits? A massive transfer of wealth and seemingly the most control on the planet Earth.
Bailout themselves. They bought exchange-traded funds, 50% of which were owned by BlackRock. In effect, BlackRock controls the stock market. And the first thing they did with this power was to bail out themselves. They bought exchange-traded funds, 50% of which were owned by BlackRock. So there's an obvious conflict of interest here. And
right, bailing themselves out. A conflict of interest doesn't matter if you're the powerful, right? If you're on the good guy team, The most obvious criminal acts of all time are okay because we're good guy team, right? Conflict of interest just no longer matters. That's why you can hire Monsef Salawi from GlaxoSmithKline with Moderna stocks to be your vaccine czar. That's totally normal in the clown world we find ourselves in today. And then he goes on to sell and make $12 million. That's okay. But if Iran does it, they're enriching themselves off the people, right?
Is that they're bailing out the financial sector at the expense of the non-financial sector. So they are.
That's the main point here. Let me go back a second so you guys can hear that. This is what it really comes down to for me. And I apologize. I'm stopping because I don't want to get a copyright strike. I am playing most of this. But the point is that we are taking the brunt. What the point of BlackRock and what they're doing in this specific situation, as she says, they're removing the financial burden from the financial district and they're putting it upon the non-financial district. That's you. They are putting that on you. And tell me that you don't feel that. Do you think that Boeing, who got a huge, massive cash influx and then laid off 7,000 people, is having a problem at all? No, you are. And your small business. You know why? Because they took the burden from them and their bad choices, all those companies and the banks that they work with, and put it on you. Right? If that hadn't happened, do you think your small business would have closed? Maybe if you're making bad personal choices in your life, but most of you out there probably were doing just fine. And it closed because they did that to you. That has to stick with people, regardless of what political party you think you're on.
The financial sector at the expense of being invested in by pension funds and other funds, and the funds generally control the stock market. So in effect, BlackRock controls the stock market. And the first thing they did with this power was to bail out themselves. They bought exchange-traded funds, 50% of which were owned by BlackRock. So there's an obvious conflict of interest here. And the problem is that they're bailing out the financial sector at the expense of the non-financial sector. So they are feeling no pain, and all the pain is imposed on us, the people. Economy, the consumer producer economy. Sure. At best, if you got a bailout, you had to go stand, or you were lucky to get the unemployment or to get payroll protection from your bank, and then you had to stand in line and qualify, and many hoops to jump through. But BlackRock bailed itself out, no strings attached. They didn't have to go through Congress, no debate.
Didn't have to go through Congress, no debate. So and I apologize for the low volume. I thought I had this up higher when I pulled it off, but it's also clipped. Her audio on the interview is actually a little choppy in and of itself. So the video link, as always, will be there for you guys to watch in full when it's done. No congressional oversight, no vote. You didn't have a say. Do you not realize how this is direct? This is not only like a tangential. This is not a side effect. This is a direct effect on your life. And you had no say in it. Does that sound like a democratic situation? Does it sound like a representative government? Or does it sound like the illusion of a representative government? When they can literally pull the veil over your eyes and rob you blind and tell you it's for your own good, and if you don't comply, you're being irresponsible. That is alarming. I mean, it's across the board. Every single part of the situation, in my opinion, is that obvious and that alarming. Like, to the point to where it's a scary situation. And this is why, as Americans, we need to stand up. Absolutely. Passive or just peaceful resistance. We will not comply. I'm sure plenty of people hate that idea and think that we should be marching through the streets with violence. That's just not my take. But you know what? We need to do something. And I think we can all see that.
How they seem to have dodged any scrutiny under the Dodd-Frank legislation.
Right.
Well, the argument was that they're not a bank, which is true technically, but they're a shadow bank. They do many of the same functions as.
Remember, they're a shadow bank, and that's why they skip past the Dodd-Frank Act, right? So the shadow bank is it's what it sounds like. You can just quickly look up shadow bank. It'll tell right. People perceive these things as murky, right? They're kind of murking, kind of behind the scenes. They're kind of banks, but they do a lot of behind. They do things. It's like criminal activity essentially. Even more so than you would look at a normal bank and be like, oh, banks are criminals. These are actually, they do the same things but with less control and oversight and restrictions and regulations. Right? They're the bad guys. I mean, this is alarming stuff. I mean, this is the idea, and especially when you see what they're using it to do right now in front of you and how that's directly affecting your life at your expense.
They don't leverage like 10 to 1 to as a bank does to create money on its books, and they don't use depositors. They don't take deposits. They're not FDIC insured. And they say that they're just a passive asset manager, so they're not. But in fact, they vote the shares on all these stocks, and the exchange-traded funds were in trouble in March. In fact, 40% of those very volatile trades in March that were taking down the economy were exchange-traded fund trades. So they were instrumental in this market volatility and market collapse.
Now, we talked about the exchange-traded, the ETFs, the exchange-traded funds in one of these previous discussions. I'm not going to go into it now because people's eyes roll over when you get into the financial stuff. But just realize that this is a situation that is wildly lucrative for BlackRock at your expense using your money. The way that they just have no bid contracts, they're buying up their own debt. I mean, it's just wrong in every sense of the word, and no one is talking about it. And as she said, why is no one talking about it? Why is nobody scrutinizing the situation? Why? Well, I think you know why.
The argument that they had to bail out the exchange-traded funds to bail out the whole market. So they are obviously systemically important, systemically risky, and they should be regulated.
Now, you also say that BlackRock is exploiting the pandemic. In what ways are they doing that?
Exploiting the pandemic.
The financial crisis actually started a year ago, at least. I mean, everybody knew we were in a bubble. Stocks were...
Everybody knew, right? When they say that, they mean the people in the know, right? They mean all the people that are actually paying attention and not just mindlessly watching mainstream media. Right? Because if you're actually paying attention, they've been telling you this is happening, that we're in a really bad way. And then Trump stands up and says, look at our amazing economy and look at all the job numbers that we're tweaking every day. That means it's meaningless. Here we are, right? And it's perfect because Trump doesn't have to pretend like there was an economic problem. He can pretend like it was COVID-19, right? We had the greatest economy on earth until the virus came along. It's just simply not true. We were in a very, very bad way. And again, it's pain. This is what's so frustrating about where we are in politics today, where this can be the most basic, obvious, apparent truth. It's readily apparent, and yet we get into arguments, and we are treated like even the mass discussion, which we're going to get into. The science is wildly clear, as I pointed out on the studies from the very people who are telling you the science shows you what they're saying, even though it doesn't. And yet we are the ones that are being irresponsible, and we are the crazy ones. As we're waving the science and they're telling you, but look at Fox News, look at CNN. Didn't you hear Fauci on TV? It's just irrational.
And they, all it took was a pin to break the bubble, and the central bankers were meeting in August, as they do every year in Wyoming. And the theme of it was how they had lost their tools. They had no more tools left to stimulate the economy if we went through another recession.
Okay, they had no more tools left, the central bankers. Basically what that means is they had no more ways to manipulate you and the system into appearing like everything was working. It was going to collapse, just like we all knew it was going to, just like anybody actually paying attention was aware of. And they then said, well, shoot, we're out of options. We're no more string and Band-Aids and tape and bubble wrap. It's not going to stick together anymore. This is going to fall apart. So now we need a plan. Enter BlackRock. Here's the plan. Enter COVID-19, execute plan. That's what this is.
So BlackRock actually made a proposal that is what what was done when we did have this collapse. So everybody was expecting a pin sooner or later, and the pin turned out to be the pandemic.
Yep.
So they were able to say, well, it was a pandemic, nobody expected it, and so we didn't expect to need this.
Nobody expected it, even though every other time they talk about it, well, here's Bill Gates, and here's NIH, and here's everybody everywhere who said we're going to have a pandemic in the next 4 years. But nobody expected it when they want you to hear that.
But we have to do it because we got to save the market, which is true. I mean, if the market went down, it would be like 1929. But this should be prevented ahead of time. I mean, we need regulation in there that...
getting into this, at the end of the day, it needs to go away, in my opinion, right? No, we should have let it collapse. Now, yes, people would have suffered, but suffering happens, right? I mean, that's the reality of life. If you put all of your eggs in one basket, well, that was your choice. Right? If the banks all collapsed today, you know what? I'd be just fine because I'm not dependent on that. But that's not what I'm saying. The point is not to say it's okay that people are suffering. The point is that is the path to less suffering. Remove them, then grow into a way that we can exist without something like that. And I don't mean without finances or money or even individual banking situations. I mean, that's a discussion we could have. But the central banks, the government-run, manipulated situation, printing money, the Fed, this stuff needs to go away. So BlackRock in this situation, the problem is that they convince us that this is needed, even though we know, most of us, even some of us maybe kind of know that they created this situation, or rather let it happen because it was profitable, and then created this situation to be able to, quote, solve it. I mean, look, hey guys, welcome to the solution being worse than the problem, right? Remember that talk? Trump saying it's not going to be, when he heard us saying that, then he came out and said, don't worry, it's not going to be. Well, here we are, guys. Welcome to the solution. It's far worse than the problem. Right? That's the point. It's just so incredible to me that we can be here, we can be watching this, have such apparent, clear information. Now, she's just talking, right? I mean, she's just saying what she thinks. Now, all of this stuff, as I did, as you could do, is easily verifiable. What? They expect you. They bank on you. Either not wanting to, caring to, or being able to. However it plays out. All of which they're actively socially engineering across all fields, whether they're making you too dumb to do it, whether they're making you too apathetic to care. It's just, this is the whole point. All that stuff's right there. And still, we're crazy for even talking about it. Or better yet, I'm racist for pointing out that it somehow has very alarming ties to a foreign government. Yeah, because that makes sense. This stuff is crazy. Now, this whole thing is something that needs to reflect on the people in charge. And it's not just Donald Trump and his administration. But yes, that is the person who is president today. So it does matter. But of course, anytime you make any kind of comment in a negative way about something they did, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, it becomes specifically, if I were to say Trump did this and it's wrong, oh, well, you're an anti-Trump hater. It's some people probably are, but the reality is there's no possible way to have any actual dialogue today in disagreement. They've done that on purpose. But this needs to reflect on all of them, very much so. And of course, we are seeing stuff like this as well. U.S. banking giant Goldman Sachs, quarterly profits, top estimates at $2.2 billion. Oh, isn't that fantastic? Goldman Sachs beat their estimate. They made a quarterly profit of $2.2 billion. Oh, while you can't feed your family, while your business went away. You know why they're doing so well? Because BlackRock made that the case. Because they all reached out and got them to come in. They pulled the money off. They pulled as she put it, they pulled the financial burden off of them and they put it on your shoulders. That is what you're staring at. That's why we're seeing companies like this make $2.2 billion in a quarter. That's why we are seeing the wealthy accumulate more wealth. I mean, how many articles have you already seen like that? Whether it's, Bezos or any of these people, their wealth has exponentially increased, right? We're not seeing that as much anymore because that's far too obvious. But realize as you lost your business, you're not allowed to open another one or open that one again. You're not allowed to do anything without the authority of your leaders or your dictators at this point. Yet here's Goldman Sachs doing better than ever. I mean, Goldman Sachs of all people, for crying out loud. That should really upset some people. But here's Fauci saying, oh, well, don't worry. It's the virus surge is just because we didn't shut down completely, right? So now we need to shut down completely. The whole point is that they are gobbling up all of the smaller business.
Given the risks that one entity this size could potentially pose to our entire country's economic stability, what do you propose needs to be done? And do you fear that we are going to see another crash like 2008?
Yes, it looks pretty obvious that we're going to see another crash. But what's happening is that the rich, the financial sector, is feeling no pain. They're the ones being bailed out. So they've got the money to buy up all the little mom and pop businesses that are going out of business. It's going to be another case of the rich getting richer, the rich having the money to scoop up all the assets at fire sale prices when all the small players have to sell.
That's what this comes down to. And how many times have we already said that? As all the business market opens up because nobody's doing the small businesses, who's stepping in? Well, the people who already got your money. All the big business that already got bailed out from the government and BlackRock, right? With your money. So now they're taking your money and then they're buying up or rather just taking your market, right? So anybody out there, whether you've got a business making T-shirts or a business selling, a bar, or it doesn't matter, right? You're going to get gobbled up by the larger corporate entities because that's happening right now. Even if that's not the plan, do you really believe that these companies right now are not going to see that as an opportunity and just start buying up property and area and whatever else? Well, the point is that Fauci is also saying, well, we need to shut down completely. Why? Probably because we can finish the point. Despite the fact that it's already shown that the shutdowns, the lockdowns, the vast majority of them, bar for I think 3 or 4 of them, all of them did lockdowns and then saw a dramatic spike in cases. Right before they did the lockdown, they were beginning to see a decline. Now, you can always point out that correlation is not causation. But to have that many correlations in every single location at the exact same time, with all of them having a decrease right before that, it's pretty clear to me that the lockdowns actually increased the problem. But guess what? So do the masks. We're going to get to that next. Now, all the people run fake news because that's what you've already decided.